Hello, everyone. I'm Harrison.
And I'm Rachel.
This week, we're talking about how we found out that Rachel is pregnant in weeks 0 to 8 of pregnancy. So stay tuned and join us on our journey to meet Baby H.
Okay, so this is our first ever podcast episode. As a quick little intro to who we are, I am Rachel, and my co-host here is my husband, Harrison. We've been together for about 4 years and married for 1 year. We are so excited to take you along with us through the journey of meeting our first baby and all the things we'll learn along the way.
We know that we're not experts by any means, but we hope that you can laugh alongside us and learn from our mistakes.
Our last name starts with H, so until we know the name of our little tyke, we'll continue with Baby H. So for now, let's get started and talk about how we found out that I am pregnant.
So at the beginning of the year, we took a pretty big trip to Disney. Say we were probably there about a week. And while we were there doing all the things at Disney, Rachel noticed that her period was a few days late. So we decided that when we get home that Rachel should go ahead and take a test.
And we were trying, so this was a little bit expected. So we did have some of those cheap paper tests from Amazon at home. So I did use the cup method. With these pregnancy tests, you can either pee directly on the stick or you can pee in a cup and dip the stick in the cup. So I peed in the cup, dipped the stick in, and immediately I saw the 2 lines. And usually one line is like the reading line that just says, I know that there's pee on the stick. And then the other one tells you if you have enough of that pregnancy hormone that you could be pregnant. And I was a little anxious about that because I didn't think that it would be able to show up that early. So I went back to bed and I told Harrison, I just took a test and I'm really nervous about the results. And he just was kind of still asleep and it's fine. But it was positive. So we decided that we'd take a test that was a step up, one of those plastic ones that comes in its own box. And I just remember that Harrison was very diligently reading through these instructions.
Yeah, I mean, there's all the different ways, that you take them. There's a million different brands, but there's also a bunch of rules about how soon should you take a test, and, is it effective in these time periods? And so, these are things that you kind of know, but I've never really paid attention to before.
Yeah. And so our second test was positive, and pretty much immediately I messaged my doctor to see what I should do. But of course, it was a Saturday and we had to wait through what felt like the longest weekend of our lives.
Yeah, this entire weekend, Rachel is paying attention to every tiny little change that happens in her body, every single thing, and is wondering whether it's a symptom. So I felt like I spent the entire weekend on Google, looking at all of these things, figuring out whether they're a symptom, whether it's a good thing, it's a bad thing, when in the end, most of them didn't end up being symptoms at all.
Right. And when it really came down to it, the only symptoms that I had that early on was a little bit of side pain, which we later found out was an ovulation cyst.
Yeah, and when we were talking to the doctors about this, it's actually pretty common that people, when they first get pregnant, to have an ovulation cyst. And so basically what happens is there will be a little pocket of all of these hormones that's created. And most of the time in a period, it will just dissolve and go away, but sometimes it doesn't. And so that's, it's pretty common and it's not really something to worry about too much.
Yeah. And then on top of that, I really just had a missed period. We were pretty early on and my cycles aren't super regular. I think the day that we found out, I was at 4 weeks and 6 days. So that Sunday, we would have been 5 weeks. And then by the time we got to check in with the doctor and see what was really going on, I was 5 weeks and 1 day.
So the next step was finding a doctor. So we had just moved to a new area because I started a new job. And so Rachel hadn't had time to set up care with an OB in our new location. So we kind of needed to go through this process and start care at a new place. And most doctors, you can't even go in until 7 weeks or later. But since Rachel was really worried about her side pain, she was able to go to her previous doctor, which was, about 2 hours away, and they were able to see her that day.
Yeah, and that appointment was really relieving. They did some blood work to measure your HCG level, which is your commonly referred to as the pregnancy hormone. It should double every 48 hours. So they were going to take my blood then and then test it again in a few days as kind of an indicator of something is growing. During that appointment, they were able to find that ovarian cyst that we talked about. And then they did see that there was a gestational sac in there. It was definitely way too early to see anything other than this little ball on the screen. I didn't even get to take the ultrasound picture that they took that day. But it was reassuring to know that things were where they were supposed to be inside my body, even though we did have to drive 2 hours away to find that out.
Yeah, and since they were going to do some additional blood work a couple days later to check for HCG, we were able to get a recommendation or referral in the area. So we were able to get into a doctor a lot sooner in the area. So we just kind of needed to start looking around for where we wanted to go. And a big thing is that right now, since we're still dealing with COVID, a lot of OBs won't actually let anybody except for the patient go into the office. So it's really important when we're setting up care somewhere that I could actually go to these appointments with Rachel.
Yeah, and I couldn't imagine going through this whole experience without Harrison, especially since it is our first child, but it's something that I have not done before. So I really wanted him to be there. And then, of course, you want to make sure that your insurance covers everything. And so we did a little digging around. And for us, we found a place that is a group practice. So every time we go, we see a different person. And it's really nice because the labor and delivery industry is so unpredictable, and you can have your one doctor that you see the whole time, but they might be on a vacation or something comes up where they can't be the one to deliver your child. So we're going to have an opportunity to meet a ton of doctors along the way and help us feel a little bit more comfortable with whoever we end up with on that delivery day.
Yeah, so our first appointment that we were able to go to was actually in the 6th week. And really, when we went there, it was more to just establish just regular care than it was really anything about the pregnancy. What was kind of nice, though, is we got to sit down with one of the doctors at the practice, and they kind of just went through the basic stuff. So when appointments are, what to expect, things to be thinking about. And we also, like Rachel got some blood work done so that they could measure the HCG levels.
It was a lot of blood work. I think they took 4 or 5 vials, and I have never had so much blood taken in one sitting.
Yeah, and I think you probably had just ate a granola bar before you went.
Yeah, my breakfast was pretty scarce, and so I was feeling a little woozy, and I just don't like the whole needles and blood thing to begin with. But we made it through, and everything was looking good so far.
Yeah, so after that appointment, basically we were told that everything's fine. We just needed to sit around and wait until the next appointment. So the next appointment was at 8 weeks, and those 2 weeks felt excruciatingly long, just because we know that it's really common for there to be a miscarriage in that time frame. So we were just really worried about, what could happen. We're really trying not to get our hopes too high because we knew it was a possibility, but we also knew there's a lot of things that, relatively soon could be changing in our lives that, we're really excited about.
Yeah. So that 8-week appointment is the first time that you get to see your little baby, and they kind of start to look like a little bit more than a ball. Still kind of fish-like with a little tail, but they have arm nubs and a head and a clear body. So that was really cool to see. That first ultrasound is usually done vaginally. And so a lot of women aren't expecting that. I think we were, so we kind of knew going into that appointment, but that's really the best way to see them when they're that small. So it was really reassuring. We saw a little heartbeat. We saw them moving.
Yeah, you're able to see a heartbeat. They don't let you hear it at that time. Just the technology that they have, you wouldn't actually be able to hear it. You can kind of see them move a little bit. It's not like huge, pronounced, and you definitely wouldn't, like, there's no way that a mom could feel the baby moving at all.
No. But that was a very reassuring appointment, just to know that their heart was beating, and so far things were good. There still is a lot of anxiety in that first trimester just because the risk of miscarriage is pretty high until you get to 12 weeks. And so I remember looking through my pregnancy apps, and it's really sad and heartbreaking when you see all these women saying that they have to leave because it didn't work out this time, or, they're having some spotting, which spotting can happen and you can go on to have a healthy pregnancy, but there's so many unknowns, and I'm very thankful that our first trimester, um, I didn't have any concerning symptoms that made us feel like a miscarriage was going to happen. And with how much anxiety I have, that was so reassuring.
Yeah, another nice thing about the doctor's office that we did find is that they have a 24-hour hotline where you can send a message through some of their apps where they give you your records, or you can literally just call the office and say, like, this is happening and I've got a couple questions. And like, it doesn't have to be a super complicated question, or like, oh, I'm experiencing this thing, is it possible that it's a miscarriage? It can be, something really, really simple about like, what should I be changing with my diet, or things like that. And someone normally will get back to us within an hour or two with an answer, and they have always seemed really happy to help us.
Yeah. And it was so nice to hear from the doctor anytime I was worried about something. I know a lot of new moms worry about some of the activities that they did before they knew that they were pregnant. And for me, we were at Disney World, so I was drinking alcohol, I was riding roller coasters, and those are some big no-nos during pregnancy. But typically that early on, they're really well protected in there and don't really get their nutrients from you quite yet. So while you should stop doing those things after you find out, it's usually not a concern if you didn't know.
Yeah, a really big thing that a lot of doctors, that we've either seen or we've been reading their papers and whatnot, a lot of them say something that's really reassuring about miscarriage is that in those very early, really throughout the entire time, you can't do anything to cause a miscarriage. That's really awesome that you can't cause it, but it also means that you can't really do anything to prevent it. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But what they're really worried about with like alcohol and roller coasters and some of the foods that you're not allowed to eat is, the risk that it has for your baby, but also like prolonged exposure. If you had one drink at the very, very early on, it's not a big deal. But if you consistently drink alcohol or smoke throughout your pregnancy, it could have a long-term issue. But they say, and they actually said it in our very first appointment. They're like, oh yeah, like you had fun, you did these things, and that's fine. Don't worry about them one bit. Just be a little bit more cautious about those things now that you do know.
And we are definitely not doctors, so don't be taking anything we say as medical advice. But we are just sharing things that we've learned as we've gone along through this, and some very real concerns that we had.
Yeah. So a big thing, once you know that you're pregnant is like, when do you start telling people? When do you start sharing the news that this is going to be a big change? And, especially because it's our first kid, we knew that there's a lot of people that are going to be really excited. But a big thing is, what do you want to share it or not? And it's a decision that, everybody has to make on their own. For some people, as soon as you know that you're pregnant, it might be time to share it. But for others, it's not going to be that way.
Yeah, and I think if miscarriage is something you're concerned about, it really can come down to who do you want to support you? Like if things aren't going to turn out right or okay, then are you okay with those people knowing and supporting you through that? Or would you rather go through that on your own? But I think we ultimately decided to tell our family after we had our first ultrasound at 8 weeks, because we were able to see that the heart was beating. And for us, that meant as of right now, they're alive, and we're going to share that with our parents and siblings.
Yeah. And so after that 8-week appointment, we just were really excited that we could start being a lot more excited that this is a possibility. We could start looking into where is the baby going to live in our home, and what things do we need for them, but also just being excited for that next stage of our lives that we really were hoping to have.
It's been really cute to see how much research Harrison has put into this. He's really excited, and I am so thankful to have a husband that is really excited to be a dad. So I think we are just looking forward to sharing everything that we are experiencing as we go through this.
Yeah, and that's part of the big reason we wanted to start our podcast anyway, is just that we kind of wanted to just have something that 20, 30, 40 years from now, we could look back at it and probably laugh at ourselves a lot, but also just remember what it was like to figure it all out for the first time.
Yeah.
So with all that in mind, we're really excited to go on this journey and share it with you.
Next time, we're going to talk a little bit about trying to conceive and our fertility journey. Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.